Hello, everybody. My name is Johnny O'Shea, and today I'm going to be explaining a lot of contemporary issues that we see through the story Gulliver's Travels. The story was written by Jonathan Swift in the 18th century and is extremely satirical. This means that it used a bunch of sarcasm and other literary things to identify and highlight many prominent issues during that time. Some things that he heavily satirized in the story were the ideas of submission towards a larger power and the idea that people like to simply follow someone because they think that that person is a higher status and stronger than they are. In the story, Gulliver is a very large man who is shipwrecked onto an island where there is a small society called the Lilliputians, and they're all extremely tiny. However, they're still able to manipulate and make Gulliver think that he is inferior to them, which is simply wrong. Through the actions that Gulliver does in the story, the reader can identify how Swift is portraying society as a single unit that follows a person anointed as powerful through a title that he has been given. And we can also see how people in that society will continue to follow him because the people of power convince people without power that they're not good enough. So, right now in the United States, one very prominent issue that has been on the rise in the past decades is the political divide of the nation. Um, it's become much more apparent in recent years. The election recently fully put into grasp how split our nation has actually become between red and blue. And it's definitely a problem that we can see today that can be brought back to Gulliver's Travels, and we can see how the problems that Swift faced in his time are also applicable today. So, many individuals in our time are actually creating lifestyles that revolve around party affiliation, I would say, and they separate themselves from people who believe differently than them. They completely build their own personality around their party affiliation. And they get so caught up in their beliefs that they ignore and disregard the ideas of other people, which is not okay exactly. But where we really see a problem is in the children and impressionable kids of the generations, because they are conditioned to follow a certain party almost blindly. They'll follow it simply because their parents tell them that that's what's right and that everything else is wrong. And this idea that people will just follow something without doing any of their own research or creating any of their own beliefs is something that's not exactly okay. It's a submission to a higher power, which is a huge theme represented in Gulliver's Travels, because we constantly see Gulliver like tricking himself into believing that he is inferior to the Lilliputians, even though he is so much bigger and stronger than him. For example, whenever he was first introduced to the society, um, he was confronted by this authority figure, a smaller guy. I mean, they were all really tiny, but he was able to identify that he was a person of status. And during their like little discussion that Gulliver actually understood none of, except for hand signals saying "Go to our town," Gulliver decided that he was going to be submissive and kept prisoner, even though he was so much stronger than him. And he claims that I once more thought of attempting to break my bonds, and observing likewise that the number of my enemies increased, I gave tokens to them to let them know that they might do with me what they pleased. What this means is that he knew he was more powerful. He knew he could break the bonds. It didn't matter. He still let them control him. He let them do what he wanted. He wanted to follow somebody. And what I'm trying to get across as my point is that idea that people are just willing to follow, willing to be a follower, I guess, of a greater power is present in Swift's time And you can see that through Gulliver's actions, and it's also very present in our time, even still, because society is getting so split based on politics and following one certain party no matter what. Their beliefs are so steadfast and set on one particular thing that we will just follow blindly. And I think that Swift did an incredible job identifying that and highlighting it through the actions of Gulliver in the story. And then it's seen that like he is Gulliver follows them around like the entire story. That doesn't really change until the very end of part 1, I would argue. But he basically follows and listens to whatever they say the entire time. So the problem persists that people will just pick a power and they'll follow that power, and then that power will have some way of manipulating the general public to think that they're on a pedestal. And that is another very big issue in today's society, is that politicians are creating ways to put themselves on a pedestal above the average person and make normal people, normal individuals like me and you, think that we're not good enough, or that our word doesn't hold as much value as theirs just because of a title that they have been given by the government. This is heavily seen in the story if we look at how the emperor gives out his strings of approval whenever he gives someone a position of power just because he wanted to. They don't really deserve it. They just got it. I think overall the story was incredibly good. I really liked Gulliver's Travels, and I really think that he did a fantastic job highlighting some issues that we can still see today. Thank you. That's all I have.